I was going to hesitate on any more videos today. Top news the other day, world top news, was a mass killing in Nueces County. This happened on Friday. Now, I didn't mention it to my friends because most of them were really not aware of it. Now, it showed up on every local media site. It's a little town that I used to drive through called Robstown. The killing were two elderly people at a nursing home after the same name of a nursing home that we used to transport people to in Kingsville, but this is Robstown, which was one of the South Texas towns that way. It was called Retama Nursing Home, Retama Village, and that's a common name used. So anyway, these two elderly people tragically were murdered in cold blood in Robstown Nursing Home. The person they identified as the shooter on one of the local media sites. I just checked all the media, and I've not spoken on this. This has happened Friday evening. It's now Sunday. But it's Richard Story. He was dead also at the nursing home with the two elderly people. Now, there's 5 murdered from the same family. Now, after they responded to the nursing home because of a shooting, they found 3 dead. And then as they started, now this made it to world news, okay? 5 people murdered in Nueces County. There's questions on this case because after the 2 people were murdered at the nursing home and the alleged shooter, Mr. Story, also killed himself. After that, they went to another response, to another home in Robstown, and found 2 more people shot dead, all from the same family, mind you. The 2 people that were found shot dead after the nursing home murders were also determined to have been killed by the dead man at the nursing home. Some of the media reports are they believe that the 2 killed a 13-year-old boy and someone else were killed before the murder-suicide, which, of course, that if it was a murder-suicide, that would be how it would have had to happen. Now, it's made a lot of attention because this is Nueces County. But some of the media reports are trying to place it, they say, a city 2 hours south of San Antonio. Correct. Not a city within the same county of Corpus Christi, Texas. I've responded to many shootings and all over the years at the fire department, and it certainly is a tragic thing. And all the investigations, the top story right now as of 2:15 p.m., the Kohler Times says the cops are mum on a motive. I couldn't read the article because you get 10 free articles online, and so it just gives you the headline. All of the local media are now speaking on this case. You know, over the last 5 years, I've talked about, I followed the criminal cases, I pray for all the victims. There was a tragic case in Corpus Christi. Now, let me bring it up to show you I have zero faith in the system. This case was a drive-by at a party where if I get the case right, 2 young children were killed. But either way, the evidence on the conviction is what I'm going to get to. When 2 young children were killed at a particular drive-by, of course, it's tragic, and there's a lot of pressure to solve that. They finally arrested a young man, and they said the evidence they convicted this young man. Now, I followed this in the Kohler Times, actually. Some of the evidence that Nueces County used as a prosecution, they introduced a gun into evidence that they found on this man. But yet their own ballistics said that this was not the gun, and I don't even know if it was the same caliber of the murder weapon. Their own ballistics on the prosecution, they still introduced that gun, which you would think you wouldn't have introduced that as proof that the young man committed the crime. But they did introduce it, and the defense, rightfully, the ballistics that the prosecution also had on the weapon showed that was not the murder weapon, but it was a weapon. Then the initial description of the vehicle was a different vehicle, but as the case continued, because they wanted to solve it, there was like the father-in-law or the father of the man's girlfriend or wife who gave testimony that he was 100% sure that he saw that young Hispanic kid at the scene of the crime. But through a Freedom of Information's request by the Caller Times, actually they showed you the interviews that the CCPD did with the man who was the key witness in the case. His initial statement was he had no idea, because he couldn't see anybody. He identified another vehicle, and the gun was someone else's gun that committed the murder. But then the cops went back, this came out in the Caller Times, and said, we need you to be sure that it's this person. After he swore he could not identify because he couldn't see who was in the car. Then he said, maybe I'm 50% sure. Then they said, we need you to be 100% sure, something of that nature. And then he changed his testimony the third time. That conviction went through and still stands till this day. Why bring that up? Because when you do an investigation in any region of the world, of course you try to tie the ballistics to the weapon. You try to tie the vehicle that the person was in, not another one. Normal societies don't do a criminal justice system like I just gave you one example. Now, I had a friend, I've not seen him now in a while, so I think maybe he's in prison. Maybe he's dead. I'll just tell you this, and I mentioned this before. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But he told me, because I work on the streets for many years, this is what he told me. He said, John, whenever there is a hit carried out in Corpus Christi, and whenever it's done with corrupt collusion of authorities, this is what he told me. He said those will be reported as murder-suicides. Okay? That's what he told me. And then he gave me the names, after the fact, of a girl, her name was Heather, who was shot and murdered in Flower Bluff. Might have been 2.5 years ago. And the name of the husband. Of course, because it was after the fact, there was nothing to report. But he was sure that that was one of those cases that would be considered a murder-suicide. I have no idea about this tragedy. This was a mass killing, if you will, in Oasis County, in Robstown, and it made national news. And just me reading that the man who is considered the suspect, he was found dead with the other 2 elderly people, possibly his parents. They were all 5 people from the same family, and the last name is Starry. There's a shooting range right here called the Starry Shooting Range. I'm not sure if it's the same family. Right that way, there's shooting range. But then to say you found the suspect killed himself at the nursing home with the 2 elderly people, and after that, they responded to another report of a shooting after that, where 2 young people were killed, and yet it was the man who committed suicide at the nursing home that is considered responsible for not only the nursing home killings, But for the other killing that was responded to after he was dead,